Welcome to today's episode. I'm excited to have a special guest with me today, Mike Kennelly, Vice President and Manager of LePage Signatures Mississauga office. Mike's sales journey spans 3 decades, beginning in 1994, and flourishing through his dedication, community leadership, and continuous growth. Known for his foundational role in Brampton's minor sports community, Mike has not only led an impressive sales career, but also shaped the real estate landscape through his leadership role. Today, we'll dive into his insights on the evolving real estate industry, leadership, and what it takes to build a successful career in real estate.
All right, Mike. Thank you for joining me today.
Very welcome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. We were talking about your family history before we started the podcast. You want to talk about that a little bit before we start?
Sure. So I am the byproduct of actually two cultures, an Irish culture and a French-Acadian culture. And I was talking to you about my Irish side, where my Irish ancestors had immigrated to Canada shortly after the Great Famine, they called it, in Ireland, which occurred in the 1840s, early 1850s. And I just kind of double checked before we started. It was the population of Ireland at the time was about 8.8 million people. And within 40, 50 years, it had gone down to 4.4 million people. So about half of the population had ceased to exist in living in Ireland or existing in Ireland. So there's about over 1 million people, they said, that died. And the remainder immigrated out of Ireland. And so on my side, there was family lore, 3 brothers that had left together. They got on a ship and came to Canada and settled in this area called the Ottawa Valley. It still exists today, out by a place called Pembroke, Petawawa, Renfrew, and the particular town was called Eganville. And so these 3 brothers started their families there, and they dispersed, as generations grew. And my dad was the first one to come to Toronto, actually. So he came to Toronto in the late 60s, I think. So imagine they lived up there for about 100 years without leaving. And it's a very remote area, which as a kid growing up, I used to love going up there, fishing and camping and running in the woods and swimming in the rivers. Oh, it was just this amazing upbringing. And those Kennellys dispersed all through Canada. A lot of them actually went straight to America as well, and to Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, the Caribbean, as a lot of the Irish did, right? They just had to get out of the country because there was not enough food available, right? There was a failure of the potato crops at the time, and because of that, the Irish couldn't feed themselves, and so they had to find alternative solutions, and hence the mass migration and then hence immigration into the various countries and stuff. And then my mom's side, she's what's called an Acadian, so not Canadian, Acadian, and they were the first actually European settlers to arrive in Canada in the early 1600s, and I believe it's 1604 is when my mother's lineage traces back to coming here. Now, it wasn't called Canada back then. The French called it the New World, I believe, and so they immigrated and landed in the Maritimes, and so they would have populated areas like Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and PEI, and then northeast part of Quebec, what we call Quebec now. Those provinces didn't exist back then, by the way, either, right? There was no...
It was all like a free land.
There was
Aboriginal people.
The First Nations were here, right? And the particular First Nations, indigenous people in that area are called the Mi'kmaq. That's the name of their tribe. And across Canada, we have like the Hurons, the Ojibways, the Iroquois, the Mohawks, but in that particular area was called the Mi'kmaq. And so these French settlers came here, and they were not prepared for the weather that we have here, particularly the winter, right? Summertime, no problem.
Can imagine back in the day how cold it was. It's probably way, way colder than that.
Yeah, we didn't have central heating systems here, natural gas furnaces, nothing like that. It was all wood-based. And so, fortunately, they got along with the indigenous people, the Mi'kmaq, and they actually traded knowledge, right? So there was farming techniques that these what became known as the Acadians brought with them. They brought building techniques with them. They brought irrigation techniques, so creating dike systems to be able to farm on the coastal areas of Nova Scotia, New Brunswick. And the Mi'kmaq helped us survive. They taught us how to hunt and gather in this big new world that they called it. And so over the years, they became very close. No animosity, no fighting with each other. Quite frankly, it would be the ideal we'd have today to look back into the past to say this is where we should use that as an example. And so over the course of about 150 odd years, no problems. And then the Acadian people experienced in French it's called le grand dérangement, or it's called the Great Expulsion in English. So le grand dérangement happened in the I think it's like 1650s or 1750s. And ultimately, the Acadian population was dispersed, and so they were sent back. Some of them to France, but the vast majority of them were put on ships and sent down the eastern seaboard of North America. Right, so they dropped these kids and families off in Boston, New York, but the vast majority ended up in what's the state's now called Louisiana. And so in Louisiana, which was very inhospitable area. It's swampland, basically, right? Full of snakes and alligators and things. And so these Acadian people were dropped off there, and they created their own community in their life that exists today. And they're the ancestors of the Acadian people, and they're called the Cajuns, Cajun, Cajuns. Okay. And so that culture is now a unique, separate culture. They got along and integrated with the Spanish settlers that were there, the indigenous people of that area. And today, there's the last names of all of these Acadian families, like my mother's. My mother's last name is called Allain, Allain, which is a very famous last name. It's one of the original settlers, as I said before. And so the journey for both sides of my family is quite interesting, where they came to Canada with nothing, created a life. My parents met each other. My mom had left the Maritimes to come to Toronto. And so had my father, and they met in an apartment building. They were each renting rooms in an apartment building down by the CNE, the CNE downtown Toronto. And they got to dating each other, I guess, and got married. I was the firstborn, and here I am.
Wow.
Yeah, it's kind of cool too.
Are you the only child, or?
I have two younger brothers. We are separated though by many years. So I'm 11 years older than my next brother. I always say that my parents, they didn't want to improve on perfection, so they didn't need to have any more kids, right? So I have a middle brother and a younger brother. They were born in 81, 82. I was born in 1970. So I'm 54.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's a very great story.
Yeah. Well, we're if you can say Canadian, we're probably as Canadian gets next to the First Nations people, and particularly the Acadians. They really are. They're their own culture. They're as I said before, they were very much integrated with the First Nations, and they actually created their own culture. We call it the Métis people in Canada, right? So it was the French Canadians integrating and marrying and having children with the First Nations people, and their children is...
And they call Métis, right?
Métis. Yeah, METIS, right? And so they are a distinct culture in Canada as a First Nations culture, right? Which is fascinating. And those originated in the Maritimes, but you see them also in the western provinces, so Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta. There's very large Métis populations and because those were the French explorers, that the voyageurs they called them, that went and explored the West and set up all these trading posts and hunting facilities and things like that. So it's fascinating when you look into it and dig into it. What I would always say to people, and what I do say, is that we all actually got along very well for a long time, and then global world wars. The French-English War basically caused so much disruption, I think, here, and pain and animosity.
Things started to turn around,
unravel, right? And
yeah.
our people, as I said before, the the Grand Arrangement happened because the Acadian people refused to pledge allegiance to the King of England and also the King of France. They just wanted to be, left alone. They were having great success doing what they were doing with the Mi'kmaq, and so they didn't want to be part of that large global conflict between the French and the English, right? And so, as a byproduct of that, the British didn't trust, I guess, this Acadian people, and that's when the expulsion happened, and they pushed us to all these other areas. So my ancestors were part of about 10% of the Acadian population that went into hiding, and they refused to get on those ships, and so they went into the forest, helped greatly by the First Nations people, and they survived for many, many years until the British gave an edict to say, okay, we're not going to be hunting you anymore and trying to get you out of the country. So it was come back and live in a civilized new world. And so my ancestors then basically set up in what's called the Acadian Peninsula in New Brunswick, and that is areas like Moncton, Shediac, Bucktouche. My parents, my mother's side came from Rishabukto, and it's all along what's called the Northumberland Strait, which you can see PEI on a good day over that strait there, which is part of the Atlantic Ocean. So it's fascinating history, right? Which we don't get taught. For me personally, I'm almost all self-taught this, because even my grandparents that passed away, they didn't know the history. Like they were completely oblivious to it, because it's not a positive piece of history, right? That happened here. What happened to First Nations people, of course, and then what happened to the Acadians. It's not something you want to put in history books and glorify, right? So I think a lot of it was brushed under the carpet. Yeah. So I've done a lot of reading on
research and reading.
Yeah, and if you ever want to see an amazing part of Canada, go to the Maritimes. It's not a huge population of Acadians that are still there, but when you get into an Acadian community, they're so loving, caring. They're just amazing people, and they'll give you the shirt off their back.
They still have kept their own tradition and culture.
Oh yeah. Every August there's an Acadian festival down in the Maritimes, New Brunswick and Nova Scotia. And they had, I think it was in the 90s. I didn't get to go to it. I was in university at the time, but they had this Acadian festival where they invited Acadian ancestors from Louisiana to come up, and there was, I think, thousands and thousands of people that came to this. Wow. That all have last names from these original settlers, which was fascinating. My parents went, my younger brothers went, but I couldn't make it. School duties, I guess, but it's.
Does it happen every year, or?
Not that one, because that was like a massive one. But there is every year like a festival that they host for that, which you taste the cooking and the culture. And I think there's a place that's called Le Sigouin, which is like here in Toronto we have the Black Creek Pioneer Village. I don't know if you've ever gone to that. It's by York University. It's a representation of what
I think I've been there.
You've been there, yeah. So
I went to York University. So
you went to York, yeah. So it's right on the campus of York, and so in high school back in the day, we'd go there as a field trip to experience what they lived, the blacksmiths and how they baked food and all that kind of stuff. Well, in New Brunswick, La Sigouin is an example of a Acadian community back in the 1800s, and it's fascinating, right, to see how these people lived. And I mean, they had no creature comforts whatsoever. I mean, these people relied upon their hands to farm, to build, to feed themselves. Today we have these creature comforts. There's no way I could survive that kind of right.
Definitely not.
Exactly. Yeah.
With all the technology and everything that we have,
100%.
We don't even pull down or up our windows anymore, car windows anymore.
Hit a button.
Break the button.
Hit a button. Yeah. As a kid going down there, I had uncles that were in the fishing industry, and I'd go as a young kid on the fishing boats, and we would jig for a fish called mackerel, which was used as the bait to catch lobster, because the lobster industry, fishing industry, is huge. It's a delicacy now. People don't realize, though, that the lobster 100 years ago was the poor man's food, right? So,
really?
Yeah, it's now become this food
Like
that everybody like, oh, we got to have that. But back, 100 years ago, 150, 200 years ago, that was what the Acadians got to eat, right? Because it was not the hoity-toity.
It's interesting how these are all socially constructed, right? Back in the day, it was poor man food. Now,
100%.
you have to, be able to avoid it, and
Absolutely, yeah.
That's,
but I recommend anybody that's watching, if you've never been to the Maritimes, go and don't fly. Drive. You can.
How long is the drive?
It's about to get to Fredericton from here, Toronto area. You're probably about 15, 16 hours, depending upon how fast you're driving and how many stops you're making too. Right? It's and how you go. So I personally enjoy going through the States. So we'll go along the 401. We'll cross in Cornwall, which is still a part of Ontario. It's almost just at the Quebec border. So we go into northern New York State. We'll go through, there's a reserve there. I think it's called Akwesasne, which, you're driving through a First Nations reserve area, and you go through northern state into Vermont. You take one of the interstates down to a place called Montpelier, which is a very nice place in Vermont. And so typically we do a 2-day drive. So we break it up into 2 days rather than just driving straight through. We'll hang out there. Then we'll leave from Montpelier, Vermont, into New Hampshire, into Maine, and then cross Maine into New Brunswick down to Fredericton. It's beautiful because you're going through mountains. You're going through and those states are stunning. Northern New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine are just unbelievable states that you see. And so you're about 16 hours. Or the option is to stay all in Canada and just go into Trans-Canada. So it's basically the 401, and you're going to be on the 401 all the way up to a little place called Rivière-du-Loup in Quebec, and you transition in into New Brunswick, northern New Brunswick, and come down the Trans-Canada that way. Again, you're going to see parts of Canada that you didn't know even existed. Have you ever been to Quebec City?
Montreal, but not Quebec City.
Not Quebec City.
Yeah.
So Quebec City, phenomenal history there, right? So that was where the major battle between the French and the English occurred in a battle called the Plains of Abraham, where the British defeated the French. And so all of North America's history turned to be, more of an English speaking dominated country. But in that city, there's the old city that still exists there. And, it dates back hundreds of years. If you want to look at history, like in Canada, history for us is 200 or 300 years old. It's not like in Europe where you're talking 1,000 years old, right? But if you want to see what it looked like 300 years ago to live in Canada, Quebec City is a great place to go. Amazing place to go,
I've seen a lot of videos, photos, but
unbelievable history.
It's beautiful.
Oh, yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So that's my background and my history and where I came from, my roots.
Fascinating.
And it is fascinating because we're just one little sliver of what makes up the fabric of Canada, right? And if you think of it, I remember, when I was a kid in school, it was called cultural mosaic. They used to call it. So they'd say this is the fabric, the tapestry, and all of us here are pieces of that fabric, and we all come from different countries, different stories, different struggles and pains, and we've come here to start a new life, and hopefully we leave all our troubles behind. Sometimes we don't, but we come here, we try to integrate into the society and offer a better life and solution and future for our kids, right? And it works. It has been working anyways. I mean, there's
made a great country.
It's a good country.
It's a beautiful country.
100%, right?
Lovely people, lovely everything.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
And things that need to be improved always. We work on improving them as well.
There's no perfection, right? It's an ongoing case study here that we're doing. And it is a beautiful country. So one of my bucket list items actually is to go explore the Arctic, right? So I want to go up to the Northwest Territories and to the Yukon. I've never been up there.
Never been either.
Yeah.
I've heard a lot about it.
It looks amazing, right? And so, as I say, one of my bucket list items is to go with my wife. And we have 2 dogs, 2 kids, and rent maybe a RV or something, and just take a month off. And drive up to Northern Ontario into Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, and then detour up into the north. It's something that resonates with me, and you see the pictures of the Arctic in the north. It just is unbelievable, right?
It is.
Yeah.
It is. Are you planning to go anytime soon?
Within 5 years.
Within 5
I
years.
wanted to use, so I'm 54. You know, I think I got another 10 to 15 years of a career in real estate. And so I want to do it while I still have my mobility. I'm not, there's no health challenges and things like that. I think people wait too long. Like they wait till they retire to do these things.
By that time, you can't even walk anymore.
You can't even walk. Right? You can't enjoy what you have been building your whole life for. So we actually decided this summer we're going to do it. It's in our 5-year plan, right? So I'm a very big planning kind of guy, as you know, as the broker here, and teaching people how to build their business as well. Build your business, build your personal life too, right? And if you don't put it on paper, if you don't set a goal,
it's not going to happen.
It's never going to happen, right?
Put it on paper, put it on your calendar.
Put it on your calendar.
I used to not do that, like last year or the year before, and I was going all over the place. I was still working, but I wasn't organized. Yeah. But I started like putting everything on my calendar, putting everything on writing, Absolutely. And you feel like much more productive, much more efficient.
100%. What the biggest advice I always say to realtors here is when you do that calendar, please put down your vacations and your personal time off first. Commit to that first, and honor that commitment to yourself, right? That's your own personal integrity to who you are.
That's something I'm lacking.
All of us are, right? Because we're in a service industry, and we wouldn't be doing this career if we didn't love to help people. And so, we choose sometimes that helping people over the commitment we made to our family to go to the movies tonight. Something comes up, I got to go show a property, so you cancel on your kid. Or the weekend dance recital or something, or these vacations, right? It's we choose to breach our own integrity that we've committed to our family, to our personal life, to the gym. We make these excuses because we love the service part of the business. But I think you really have to build these silos around that, right? That no matter what, those are unbreakable commitments that you've made to yourself and to your family.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. And that work-life balance has to be there, right? Otherwise you burn out and, you won't be able to. It's a marathon, right? You have to keep going for years and years and years.
Love it, right? And how old are you?
I'm 34.
So we're 20 years apart, right? So I'm 20 years ahead of you, and you're thinking like that already at this age is fantastic, because I was not thinking like this at this age. It took me probably another 10 years of my life to go, okay, there's priorities I got to set in my life, and these priorities are, I got to take care of myself and my family. And the vehicle called real estate for me is to, help us take care of those basic necessities, shelter, food, and all those types of things, and whatever's left over to enjoy to our life. But without making that firm commitment for ourselves, you will burn out, like you said. And if you burn out, how good or what good are you going to be to your client, to your end person that you're there to serve, right?
Very important. Yeah, that's something that I have to put into my plan.
Absolutely.
I keep saying it, but doing it is actually very difficult.
Yes.
Very difficult. Can you tell us what drew you into real estate in 1994 and how your career began?
How my career began. So I was full-time started in 1994. And I always kid people that my first real job was in actually real estate when I was like 4 or 5 years old. And I grew up down in Scarborough, right at the far end, east end of the beaches area. And my aunt, who is still, believe it or not, in her mid-80s selling real estate, she was a realtor back then. And this is in the 70s, okay, like 75, 74, like that era, right? 5, 6 or something like that. And my first job was delivering some of her flyers with her son, my cousin. And so we went out on the hustings delivering flyers. And funny story there too. We had dropped some of these flyers in one of the sewers to get out and do the work. It wasn't my idea. I just claimed that. And so we backed up the sewer, and my aunt had gotten a call, and my aunt came over. We lived side by side actually in houses there, and she wanted to know, had you completed the delivery, and me, I couldn't tell live, like, no, and Margo, we didn't. Well, I know because the sewer backed up, and I guess the city of Toronto called her. So that my first job was that. That's a joke. I got into the licensing program in 1992. OREA, the Ontario Real Estate Association at the time, was the education provider. And I was still in university. I was at the University of Guelph studying psychology. And so I did the courses, but when I completed them, I didn't sell because I was still in school. But I had prepared myself because my aunt was in this business. I have a cousin that has his own brokerage up north in a town called Sturgeon Falls. And so he was in the business. And my cousin, another cousin, is in the business. He works down in Toronto as well with one of our competitor companies. Anyhow, I've always been fascinated by real estate. I mean, it is one of, in psychology, Abraham Maslow is a very famous psychologist, right? And he has the hierarchy of needs, and the very lowest level is to
food, shelter.
Right, shelter, right? So it's a basic necessity. And my mind always was, I'm either going to go into the health profession through psychology and, go up the ranks and become a psychologist and a practitioner there, or real estate. And so I went real estate instead because we all need shelter. And, who doesn't like the housing experience? I mean, you go to these TV shows, HGTV, and they're littered with housing shows, like for renovations or first-time buyer shows, or downsizing thing, or you're building a cottage. Like this is our world now. People are just inundated with the real estate stuff, and I was as a kid. And so when I finished my studies, I went in full time in March of 1994. I started with a small little family company, not a brand, not a big franchise or anything, small little family run business, which they were just phenomenal. Like I truly to this day credit my time there, and I was there from 1994 to 1998 with basically putting all the foundation of what I do together. Like they were just an amazing company, family run, as I said. Knowledge was excellent. I learned everything, most of what I know from like the core part of the business there at this company. So I to this day I credit them for doing that. And then as my journey evolved, I did transfer to the Royal LePage. I can say it was like February of '98, if my memory serves correctly. And that was a brokerage up in Brampton. It was a corporately owned brokerage. It wasn't a franchise of Royal LePage. And so I started there in '98, and I've been with the company ever since. So, wow, what is that, like 26, 70 years? I got my 25-year plaque a couple years ago. I remember that. So, yeah.
Wow, that's interesting.
And my career, for the first, from 94 to 2007, January, was in sales. So I'm a broker leader here as the broker manager. I was a salesperson, just like you. And so I walked in your shoes, I talked in your shoes, and did everything that we tell you to do. And I did it for 13 years. And I built my business not on so much the door knocking, the telephone calls, those types of very aggressive kind of sales tactics, which work, right? Like, let's make no mistake. I know I have lots of friends that are so successful at that, but I believe they're more hardwired psychologically to be able to do that. I wasn't. I'm more of a relationship guy. Let's get to know each other and help each other build whatever we're trying to build here. And so I almost immediately started in my career giving back to the community. So I had played hockey and baseball, and decided to give back to my community. So I became a coach, became a sponsor of these teams. I joined their board of directors and executives. So I volunteered, as a director on things. I volunteered in training kids in baseball and hockey. And so I started to develop this reputation within that little small community as being, the realtor guy, right? Because it was never about going to a hockey arena or a baseball diamond and, hey, I'm selling real estate, want to buy, sell real estate. Like I was not that guy, right? It was like help you.
And it doesn't work that way. I mean, like you have to have that relationship, that 100%. Connection with people, right?
100%. And so the conversation always evolves. So, what do you do for a living, or what do they reciprocate? And even the most narcissistic person's going to ask you what you do after they've told you what they're all about for 90% of the conversation. And that's when you let them know what you do. And I try to encourage our realtors to create this kind of elevator pitch. I don't know if you ever heard the elevator pitch kind of mentality, where you're going up an elevator, so somebody asks you what you do, and you got 30 seconds to do it, basically. And so try to get out in 30 seconds, what do you do? That way, you're prepared if everybody ever asks you what you're doing, but two, a reminder of what you actually do. And so I built that relationship business. A lot of people say databases of people. I say, no, I have relationships of people.